You think an ape who hasn't finished evolving can crack a problem I built?
That got a big laugh. Whole room. 300 people cracking up like it was a comedy show, not a math competition at Columbia University. Professor Gerald Whitfield stood at the podium.
I gave that same problem to my golden retriever once. Took him 3 minutes to walk away.
The room lost it. Cora didn't flinch. She looked straight at him and said,
"Are you done? Because I'd like to see the problem now."
Whitfield grinned.
Fine. Let's see how fast you quit.
She didn't quit. She made every single person who laughed that day choke on it, starting with him. To understand what happened that day, you need to understand the room Cora Lawson walked into. The Whitfield Sterling Open Mathematics Invitational, held every year at Columbia University in New York City. 19 years running, founded, funded, and chaired by one man, Professor Gerald Whitfield. This wasn't some local science fair. Past winners went on to MIT, Princeton, and Fields Medal shortlists. Winning this competition didn't just look good on a college application, it launched careers. It changed lives. And for 19 straight years, Gerald Whitfield decided who got that chance. The lecture hall seated 300. Mahogany walls, portraits of past winners lining the corridor outside. Every single one white, every single one male, except for one woman added in 2018. The judges sat elevated on a raised platform, looking down at the contestants below. 5 panelists, Whitfield in the center chair. The audience was exactly what you'd expect. Prep school kids in blazers. Their parents in the third row already networking. Private tutors standing in the back, arms crossed, scouting. A live stream running with a few hundred viewers. Press from 2 academic journals. And then there was Cora. Cora Lawson, 16 years old. Born and raised in Brownsville, Brooklyn, one of the toughest neighborhoods in New York City. She lived with her grandmother, Gloria Lawson, in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a building where the elevator hadn't worked in 3 years. Her school, Frederick Douglass High, had its math program cut 2 years ago. Budget problems. No advanced classes. No math team. No teacher qualified to read what Cora had been writing in her notebooks since she was 13. Because here's the thing about Cora Lawson. She taught herself. Library books, free online lectures, YouTube videos at 2 in the morning on her grandmother's old tablet with a cracked screen. She studied number theory the way other kids studied video games, obsessively, joyfully, alone. Her notebook, a $2 marble composition book from the bodega on the corner, was filled with original proofs. Not homework, not practice problems. Original work. Theorems she built herself, from scratch, in handwriting so small you'd need a magnifying glass to read it. No teacher had ever reviewed that notebook, because no teacher at her school could. So how did she end up at Columbia? Her brother Derek, 24 years old, worked night shifts loading trucks at UPS so their grandmother wouldn't lose the apartment. Derek found the competition flyer crumpled up on a bulletin board at a community center in East New York. Entry was free, open to the public. Any high school student could register. He smoothed out that flyer, brought it home, and said, "You should do this." Cora looked at him. "It's at Columbia." So? "So I don't exactly fit the profile, Derek." He didn't argue. He just said, "You fit the math." That Saturday morning, Derek borrowed a car from his coworker, drove Cora across the bridge into Manhattan, and dropped her off in front of a building that looked like it was designed to make people like them feel small. Cora wore her best clothes, clean jeans, a pressed white blouse, her grandmother's good earrings, small gold studs that Gloria wore to church every Sunday for 30 years before she gave them to Cora and said, "You wear these when you need to remember who you are." She arrived 40 minutes early. She walked into the registration lobby alone. The volunteer at the check-in table looked at her school name, Frederick Douglass High, and asked twice if she was in the right building. Cora said yes both times. The volunteer shrugged and handed her a name badge. When she entered the lecture hall and sat down, the seat next to her stayed empty. The whole row filled up on both sides. But that one seat, right next to Cora, stayed empty for the entire pre-competition briefing, like there was an invisible wall around her. Now let me tell you about the man she was about to face. Gerald Whitfield wasn't some fraud. That's what makes this story hurt. He was a real mathematician, published in the Annals of Mathematics, cited hundreds of times, tenured at Columbia for over 20 years. He had earned his authority the hard way, and he believed, truly believed, that talent came from a certain kind of background, certain schools, certain families, certain zip codes. He wasn't evil. He was worse than that. He was certain. And his favorite student, the one everyone expected to win, was already seated in the front row. Harrison Moore, 18, Dalton Academy, two-time semi-finalist. Whitfield had mentored him personally since he was 14. Harrison glanced at Cora once when she sat down. Then he looked away, the way you look past something that isn't worth noticing. But Cora, she opened her notebook under the desk and looked at a proof she'd written back in February, 5 months ago, before she even knew this competition existed. She had been waiting for a room that could understand what was inside that notebook. She just didn't know the room would try this hard to keep her out. The competition started at exactly 9 in the morning. Whitfield stood at the podium, adjusted his microphone, and welcomed the room. 42 contestants, the best young math minds in the tri-state area. That's what he called them. This competition demands rigor, he said. It demands discipline. It demands the kind of intellectual preparation that separates serious mathematicians from... He paused, let his eyes drift across the room, and landed on Cora for exactly 1 second. Hobbyists. A few people in the audience smiled. They got the message. The qualifying round rules were simple. 5 problems, 30 minutes. Show all work on official competition paper using the competition pens provided. No outside materials, no calculators, no personal notes of any kind. That last rule hit different for Cora. A proctor walked down the aisle collecting anything that wasn't issued by the competition. When he reached Cora's desk, he picked up her marble notebook, the one with 5 months of original proofs, the one she'd carried from Brownsville like a lifeline, and dropped it into a plastic bin without looking at it. Cora watched it go. Her jaw tightened. For the first time since she walked into that building, something close to fear crossed her face. That notebook was her entire arsenal. Every idea, every framework, every shortcut she'd built in the dark, alone, at 2 in the morning. Gone. Just like that. But then the problem set landed on her desk. 5 pages, stapled in the corner. The questions were projected on the big screen at the front of the hall so the audience could follow along. Cora picked up the competition pen, read problem 1, and started writing. Her handwriting was small, precise, fast. She moved through the first problem like she was reading a sentence she'd already memorized. Problem 2, same thing. Problem 3, she paused for maybe 10 seconds, then kept going. By the 10-minute mark, most contestants were stuck on problem 3. Some were still on 2. A few were already sweating. Cora was on problem 4. A parent in the audience leaned over to the person next to them and whispered, "Who is that girl?" Nobody answered, because nobody knew. Harrison Moore, 3 rows to her left, was working steadily, confident, clean handwriting. He was on problem 3, ahead of most, behind Cora. But problem 5 was where things got interesting. Cora reached it with 11 minutes still on the clock. She read it once. Then she read it again. And then she did something nobody else in that room did. She stopped. Not because she was stuck. She stopped because something was wrong. The problem itself, the way it was written, didn't work. She could feel it the way a mechanic feels an engine vibrating wrong before anything breaks. The math didn't land. Something was off in the bones of it. She read it a 3rd time, and there it was. The 3rd term in the series. the exponent. It was written as cubed, but if you carried that through the expansion, the whole series blew up. It diverged. No bounded solution. The problem, as written, was impossible. Not hard, impossible. Cora looked up at the screen. The same wrong problem projected for everyone to see. 300 people staring at it, 41 other contestants working on it, and not one of them had noticed. She looked back down at her paper. She had 11 minutes left. She could just skip it, play it safe, move on. But Cora Lawson didn't come all the way from Brownsville to play it safe. She finished her answer for what the problem should have been, the corrected version with the right exponent, then set her pen down and waited. Hands flat on the desk. Calm. The timer counted down. Other contestants scribbled frantically. Cora sat still. Because she knew something the rest of them didn't. And in about 5 minutes she was going to say it out loud, in front of everyone. Time was called. Pens down. Proctors moved through the rows collecting papers. Whitfield stood at the podium and announced that results would be reviewed by the panel. The top 16 would advance to the semi-final round. Standard procedure. But before that, he opened the floor. If any contestant wishes to raise a procedural question about the problem set, he said, now is the time. Silence. 41 contestants sat there. Some looked relieved. Some looked defeated. A few were already packing up, sure they hadn't made the cut. Nobody raised a hand. Nobody had anything to say. Except Cora. Her hand went up. Steady. No hesitation. Whitfield saw it and his eyebrows climbed. He looked at her the way you look at a dog that just stood on its hind legs. Surprised. Amused. Slightly annoyed. Yes, he said. The young lady from, he checked his sheet, Frederick Douglass High. He said the school name the way you'd say the punchline of a joke. A few people in the audience chuckled. Cora stood up. She didn't rush. She didn't mumble. She spoke clearly, loud enough for the whole room to hear without raising her voice. Problem 5, Professor. Whitfield tilted his head. What about it? The third term in the series. The exponent is written as cubed. I'm aware of what I wrote. Then you're aware it doesn't work. The room shifted. You could feel it. That sudden tightness in the air when someone says something that wasn't supposed to be said. A few parents leaned forward. Harrison Moore stopped packing his bag. Cora continued. Her voice was calm, almost clinical. If you carry the cubed exponent through the expansion, the series diverges. There's no bounded solution. The partial sums keep growing. They never settle. She paused, just long enough to let that land. The intended exponent was squared. If you correct that, the series converges through standard partial sum analysis, and the proof follows a clean path. I solved it with the corrected version. Dead quiet. 300 people, not a cough, not a whisper. Whitfield's face went through about 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, irritation, a flash of something that looked like doubt, then a mask, smooth, professional, controlled. He turned to Professor Nathan Caldwell, the young associate professor sitting to his right on the panel. Caldwell was already checking the problem on his tablet. His fingers moved fast. His eyebrows went up. He looked at Whitfield and gave a small nod. Almost invisible. But Cora saw it, and so did anyone who was paying attention. Whitfield cleared his throat. He adjusted his microphone, and he said, "That's a printing error. It will be taken into account during scoring." That's it. That's all he said. No thank you. No acknowledgement. No good catch. No impressive work. Nothing. He moved on immediately, like Cora had pointed out a typo in the lunch menu. But here's what everyone in that room understood, even if nobody said it out loud. A 16-year-old girl from a school with no math program just found an error in a problem designed by a tenured Columbia professor, the man who created this competition, who had been writing these problem sets for 19 years. And she explained exactly why it was wrong and exactly how to fix it in front of his own audience, on his own stage. And he couldn't even say thank you. The audience noticed. The murmurs started low, then spread. People were whispering to each other. A few were typing on their phones. The live stream chat, which had been dead for most of the qualifying round, suddenly started moving. Dr. Elaine Prescott, sitting at the far end of the judges' table, hadn't said a word the entire morning. She was a visiting professor from MIT, one of the few black women in elite mathematics, invited as a guest judge. She had a reputation for being fair, exacting, and impossible to impress. She looked at Cora for a long moment. Then she picked up Cora's qualifying paper from the stack in front of her, marked something in the margin, and folded the page. Her face gave nothing away, but she kept that paper separate from the rest. Harrison Moore, from 3 rows back, was staring at Cora. His expression had shifted. When she first sat down, he'd looked right through her. Now he was looking at her like she was a problem he hadn't expected to encounter. 20 minutes later, the qualifying scores were posted on a screen at the front of the hall. Cora's name was on the list. She'd made the top 16. But the number next to her name wasn't what she expected. See, here's what Whitfield did. Instead of crediting Cora for correctly identifying the error and solving the corrected problem, which she was the only contestant to do, he threw out problem 5 entirely. For everyone. All 42 contestants were rescored out of 4 problems instead of 5. Cora had solved all 5 correctly. She had the only perfect score. The only perfect score in 19 years of this competition. But with problem 5 erased, her advantage disappeared. She dropped from 1st place to 9th. Still qualifying, but stripped of what she'd earned. Derek saw the scores from the back row. He stood up. His hands were clenched. He took a step toward the aisle. Cora caught his eye from across the room. She shook her head. Just slightly. One small movement. Not now. Derek sat back down, but his jaw was tight, and his eyes stayed locked on Whitfield for a long time. Cora looked at the scoreboard one more time. 9th place. She blinked once. Then she turned away and started preparing for the next round. Because the qualifying round was just the beginning. The semifinal was live, on stage, in front of everyone, no place to hide, for anyone. And Cora Lawson was done hiding. The semifinal round changed everything. No more sitting at a desk, scribbling answers on paper. This was live. 2 contestants on stage at the same time, working the same problem, projected on a massive screen for every person in that lecture hall to watch in real time. Every step visible, every mistake exposed, every second counted. 16 contestants, 8 pairs, 10-minute clock per round. Fastest correct proof wins. Cora's first opponent was a 17-year-old from Stuyvesant, one of the best public schools in New York. Smart kid, confident. He walked onto the stage like he belonged there, which he did. He'd been training for this since freshman year. The problem appeared on screen. Both contestants started writing at the same time. The Stuyvesant kid was good. Clean work, logical steps. He was moving through the proof at a solid pace, and the audience was nodding along. This was what they expected. Textbook execution from a textbook student. Then they looked at Cora's side of the screen. She was already done. Not almost done. Done. Pen down, hands at her sides. The clock showed 6 minutes and 12 seconds remaining. She'd finished in under 4 minutes. The Stuyvesant kid was still writing when the proctor called the result. He looked at Cora's work on screen, then looked at his own, then sat down without saying a word. The audience wasn't whispering anymore. They were watching. Round 2. Cora's next opponent, Harrison Moore. When his name was called alongside hers, something shifted in the room. This was the matchup. The prep school prince versus the girl from Brownsville. Whitfield's star pupil versus the kid he'd laughed at 3 hours ago. Harrison walked to the stage with perfect posture, blazer buttoned, pen in hand. He didn't look at Cora, not because he was ignoring her, because he was focused. For the first time all day, Harrison Moore looked like someone who knew he was in a real fight. But before they started, Whitfield announced a rule change. The semifinal round would now use a challenge format. After each contestant presented their solution, The opponent had 60 seconds to identify an error or demonstrate a superior alternative path. If they found a legitimate flaw or a better method, they could steal the point. This rule was not in the original program. A few parents in the audience looked at each other confused. One of them flipped through the printed competition booklet, searching for it. It wasn't there. Caldwell leaned toward Whitfield at the judges' table and said something. Whitfield waved him off. The problem appeared. Both contestants began. Harrison finished first this time, barely. His solution was clean, technically flawless. 12 steps, standard expansion, every line justified. Textbook perfect. The audience applauded politely. Then it was Cora's challenge window, 60 seconds. She didn't attack his work. She didn't point out an error. Instead, she said something nobody expected. His solution is correct. Harrison blinked. The audience went quiet. But it takes 11 steps, Cora continued, because it follows the standard expansion method. There's a substitution you can make at step 3 that collapses the entire thing. She turned to the board, picked up the chalk, and wrote. 4 steps. Same answer. Same proof. 4 steps instead of 11. She set the chalk down and stepped back. The room gasped. Not a polite gasp, the kind that comes out before you can stop it. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. A grad student in the back said, "Oh my God," loud enough for the microphone to pick up. Harrison Moore stared at the board, then stared at Cora, then stared at the board again. Whitfield's pen stopped moving. He didn't write anything on his scoring sheet, he just stared. The judges huddled. Caldwell was nodding. Prescott's face was unreadable, but she wrote something on her sheet. After 30 seconds, the result was announced. Point to Lawson. The bracket for the final round went up on screen 10 minutes later. Cora read it. Then she read it again. The final round wasn't student versus student. It was something called the Exhibition Challenge, a tradition Whitfield created 3 years ago. The last contestant standing doesn't face another student. They face a problem selected personally by the judging panel. In practice, that meant one thing. Cora would be solving a problem hand-picked by Gerald Whitfield, the same man who compared her to a dog, the same man who erased her perfect score. And she'd be doing it alone, on stage, in front of everyone. But what nobody in that room knew yet, not even Cora, was that the problem Whitfield had chosen wasn't designed to test her. It was designed to break her. Cora had 45 minutes to prepare. That was the rule. Before the exhibition challenge, the finalist got access to a private room, a desk, reference materials, and 45 minutes to warm up. No coaching, no phone, no outside help, and no personal notebooks. Cora asked for hers. The proctor checked with the judges' table. The answer came back in under 10 seconds. Competition materials only. Cora closed her eyes for a moment. Just a moment. Then she opened them, sat down at the desk, and got to work. The reference materials were standard. Textbooks, past competition problem sets, published proofs, the kind of stuff you'd find in any well-funded university library, which meant the kind of stuff Cora had never had easy access to. But she didn't start with the textbooks. She pulled 3 past competition problem sets from the stack, specifically the ones from the last 3 years. She solved the hardest problem from each set, all 3, in under 10 minutes. The proctor standing by the door was trying not to react. He failed. His eyebrows went up and stayed there. That was mini-win number 1. Then Cora did something unexpected. She pushed the textbooks aside and pulled out blank competition paper. She started writing, not solutions, but structures, frameworks, maps of how different types of problems connected to each other. See, Cora had read Whitfield's published papers, all of them, not because anyone assigned them, because they were free online, and she was curious, and she had a grandmother's old tablet and a lot of late nights with nothing else to do. She knew his style. She knew the patterns he loved, the way he liked to embed a recursive structure inside what looked like a straightforward proof, the way he always circled back to the same family of functions in his harder problems. The way his most difficult work shared a common skeleton, a structural fingerprint that ran through everything he wrote. She mapped it out. 6 pages of competition paper filled with frameworks, decision trees, if-then branches. She was reverse engineering the mind of the man who was trying to end her run. That was mini-win number 2. Then her phone, which was supposed to be confiscated but had been left in her jacket pocket by mistake, buzzed once. A text from Derek. "Grandma says she's praying for you." Cora's hand shook, just for a second. She stared at that text and the weight of everything pressed down at once. This wasn't just a math competition. This was her grandmother's good earrings. This was her brother's borrowed car and night shifts and the elevator that hadn't worked in 3 years. This was every person who ever looked at her zip code and made a decision about her brain. She put the phone away, breathed, went back to work. That was the mini-loss. The moment the human cost showed through the armor. Cora returned to her frameworks. She circled one pattern, a recurring structural element that appeared in Whitfield's last 3 publications. A specific way he liked to nest dependencies inside what looked like independent variables. If he used that structure in the exhibition problem, she'd recognize it. She circled it twice and underlined it. That was mini-win number 3. Then, the mini-loss that almost broke her focus. The walls in the preparation room were thin, university budget cuts apparently, and through that thin wall, Cora heard voices. 2 of them. One was Harrison Moore. "Honestly, it doesn't matter what she does," Harrison was saying to someone. His tone wasn't cruel, it was factual, the way you'd describe gravity. The exhibition problem is designed for someone who studied under Whitfield. It's built on frameworks he teaches in his advanced seminar. No public school kid can touch it. She had a good run, but this is where it ends. He wasn't being mean. That was the worst part. He genuinely believed it. And based on everything he knew about how the world worked, he was right. Cora heard every word. She sat very still for about 5 seconds. Then she picked up her pen and went back to her frameworks. She didn't change anything she was doing, but she pressed harder. The pen dug into the paper a little deeper. While Cora prepared, the lecture hall was transforming. The live stream viewer count had tripled since the semifinal. Someone in the audience had recorded Cora's 4-step solution on their phone and posted it online. The clip was being shared with captions like, "Who is this girl?" and "Columbia Math Competition. You need to see this." A local news outlet had sent a camera crew. They were setting up in the back of the hall, running cables, adjusting lights. What started as an academic competition was becoming something else. A story. A moment. The pressure in that room was building like steam in a pipe. At the judges' table, Dr. Elaine Prescott was reviewing Cora's qualifying papers. All of them. She'd separated them from the stack earlier, and now she was going through each one with a red pen. Not correcting, annotating. Making notes in the margins. Cross-referencing something in a journal she'd brought with her. Prescott was a woman who had spent 30 years in mathematics. She'd seen talent. She'd seen brilliance. She'd also seen 1,000 students who were good but not special. Whatever she was seeing in Cora's papers, it had her full attention. She didn't share her notes with anyone, not yet. Back in the prep room, Cora had 5 minutes left. She reviewed her 6 pages of frameworks one more time. She thought about the pattern she'd circled, the one from Whitfield's 3rd paper, page 12. If he used it, she was ready. If he didn't, she'd adapt. Either way, she was walking back into that room. A knock on the door. "Time, Miss Lawson." Cora stood up. She straightened her blouse. She touched her grandmother's earrings. Just a quick brush of her fingertips against the small gold studs. Then she walked back into that lecture hall. 300 people turned to look at her, plus the camera crew, plus the live stream audience, which had now crossed 3,000 viewers. Every eye, every lens, every screen pointed at her. The problem appeared on the big screen behind Whitfield's podium. Cora read it. Her face didn't change, but inside something clicked. Because the problem, the one Whitfield had hand-picked to end her, used a structure she recognized. Not the exact structure. Whitfield was too smart for that. He'd buried it deeper, wrapped it in an extra layer of complexity, dressed it up in notation she'd never seen in a textbook. But the bones underneath? The skeleton? She'd seen those bones. In Whitfield's third paper, page 12, the pattern she'd circled twice and underlined. She picked up the chalk, and 300 people held their breath. But before Cora could write a single line, Dr. Elaine Prescott stood up. The room went quiet. Prescott had barely spoken all day. She'd sat at the end of the judge's table like a statue, watching, writing, giving nothing away. So when she pushed her chair back and reached for her microphone, every head in the room turned. "Before we begin," she said, "I'd like to invoke my privilege as guest judge to add a condition to the final round." Whitfield turned to her sharply. His mouth opened, then closed. He wasn't used to being interrupted on his own stage. Prescott didn't look at him. She looked at the room. The contestant may solve this problem using any method she chooses, any framework, any approach, including methods not covered in the standard curriculum. She paused. Then she added in a voice that was calm but carried to every corner of the hall, "Mathematics does not care where you learned it." The room rippled. A few people in the audience nodded. A few others looked confused. But the mathematicians in the room, the ones who understood what had just happened, they sat up straighter. Because what Prescott had done was surgical. The standard competition rules favored formal, curriculum-based methods. The kind taught at Dalton Academy, at Stuyvesant, in Whitfield's private seminars. If you learned math inside the system, the rules protected you. If you learned it outside the system, in a library, on a cracked tablet, alone at 2 in the morning, the rules worked against you. Prescott had just kicked the wall down. Whitfield leaned toward her. They exchanged words, quick, tight, inaudible to the audience but visible to everyone. His jaw was clenched. His hand gripped the edge of the table. Prescott didn't flinch. She was an MIT professor with 3 decades of published work. He couldn't overrule her, not here, not in public, not without looking like he was afraid of a 16-year-old girl. He sat back, said nothing, but his face said everything. Cora stood at the board. She'd watched the entire exchange without moving. Now she looked at the problem on the screen one more time, and something shifted. Not in the room, in her. Her shoulders dropped, not in defeat, but in release. Like a lock had opened. She wasn't trapped in their system anymore. She could use her own language, her own architecture, the math she'd built alone, in the dark with no one watching. She started writing, but not from the top of the board. She started from the middle, working outward in both directions, building the proof from its core, expanding toward the edges. A few mathematicians in the audience recognized the technique. Most didn't. But 10 minutes in, Cora stopped writing, and it wasn't because she was done. It was because she'd found something inside the problem that nobody, not Whitfield, not Prescott, not anyone, had expected to be there. Cora's chalk stopped moving. She stood at the board, hand frozen mid-line, staring at what she'd written. Her eyes moved left, then right, scanning her own work like she was reading a sentence that suddenly stopped making sense. She didn't move. 10 seconds. 20. 30. 300 people watched a 16-year-old girl stand completely still in front of a chalkboard, and the silence in that room was the loudest thing you've ever heard. The live stream chat exploded. "She's frozen. It's over. Called it. No way a public school kid finishes this." The comments scrolled so fast they blurred. Harrison Moore, sitting in the front row, leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. Not gloating, just the posture of someone watching a prediction come true. Whitfield checked his watch. A thin expression crossed his face, not quite a smile, closer to relief. The expression of a man who had been right all along and was watching the proof arrive on schedule. Here's what happened. Cora's inside-out approach had been working, beautifully. She'd found the structural skeleton she expected, the pattern from Whitfield's third paper, and she'd been building around it with precision. Every line connected, every step followed from the last. But 12 steps in, she hit something she didn't expect. A second-order dependency buried inside the problem. A trap. A hidden variable that her framework hadn't accounted for. Not because her framework was wrong, but because the problem had a layer she couldn't see until she was deep enough inside it. It was like climbing a mountain and discovering 3/4 of the way up that the last 100 feet were made of glass. Her method still worked, the logic was sound, but she needed one more bridge, one connecting step between where she was and where the proof needed to land. And that bridge required a technique she'd never formalized. She'd played with it in her notebook, sketched it, tested it on smaller problems at 2 in the morning, but she'd never built it under pressure, in public, with 300 people and a camera crew watching. The chalk hung in the air. Her fingers were white around it. Whitfield leaned into his microphone. "Miss Lawson." His voice was gentle. That was the weapon. "Do you wish to continue, or would you like to concede?" A pause, then softer, almost kind. "There is no shame in recognizing one's limitations." The words landed like a hammer wrapped in velvet. Every person in that room felt it. The gentleness was the cruelty. He wasn't mocking her now. He was offering her a way out, the way you'd offer a child a tissue after they scrape their knee. Compassionate, patronizing, final. A few people in the audience looked away. It was hard to watch. Cora's hand dropped to her side. The chalk hung loosely in her fingers. She stared at the board, at the beautiful, incomplete proof that was so close and so impossibly far from finished. She looked at the audience. 300 faces, most of them already writing the ending in their heads. The girl from Brownsville gave it a good shot, better than anyone expected. But this is where the story ends. This is where it always ends. Then she looked at the back row. Derek was there. He hadn't moved, hadn't stood up, hadn't shouted encouragement or pumped his fist. He was just sitting there, looking at his little sister with the same steady expression he'd had her whole life. The same look he gave her when the lights got shut off and he said they'd figure it out. The same look he gave her when she showed him a proof he couldn't understand and said, "I think I found something." He didn't nod. He didn't have to. Then, from the judge's table, Dr. Prescott spoke. One sentence. Not encouragement, not a hint, just a fact. "The clock has not expired, Miss Lawson. You have the floor." Cora looked at Prescott. Prescott looked back. Nothing else passed between them. No secret message, no wink. Just one woman telling another, "The door is still open." Cora turned back to the board. She put the chalk down, picked up a fresh piece, and started writing. Not where she left off, but on a completely blank section of the board. A new approach, a different angle. She was abandoning her original method. 12 steps of beautiful work, left hanging, and starting over. The audience held its breath. The live stream chat went quiet for the first time all day, because something in Cora's face had changed. The fear was gone. What replaced it was harder to name. Focus, maybe. Or something fiercer. She was writing faster now, looser. Her handwriting changed. Bigger strokes, less careful, more alive. She wasn't performing for the room anymore. She was thinking out loud, in chalk, in public, with everything on the line. And what she wrote next would take 6 minutes, fill one side of the board, and change the way Professor Gerald Whitfield thought about mathematics for the rest of his life. The chalk clicked against the board. That was the only sound in the room. Click, click, click. 300 people, a camera crew, and 3,000 live stream viewers, all watching a 16-year-old girl's hand move across a chalkboard. Cora wrote. She started with the specific case, the problem Whitfield designed, restated it cleanly, one line, then the base case underneath, the foundation. So far, nothing unusual. Any strong contestant could have done this much. Then she introduced a variable, a single substitution. One new element inserted at exactly the right point, and the problem opened up like a locked door swinging wide. What had been a narrow, specific question suddenly became a hallway with rooms on both sides. A grad student in the third row whispered, "What is she doing?" The professor next to him didn't answer. He was reading every line, mouth slightly open. Cora kept writing. She wasn't rushing. Each line followed from the last the way a river follows gravity. Step by step, she extended the specific case outward. The original problem asked for a proof of one thing. Cora was proving that the one thing was part of a family. A whole family of solutions sharing the same structure. The problem Whitfield designed was a single room. Cora was building the entire house around it. Halfway through, she paused. She needed a supporting piece, a lemma. She wrote it in the margin. 5 lines, compact, precise. Professor Caldwell froze. He'd seen this lemma before, not in any textbook. He'd seen it in Cora's qualifying paper from round 1. The same idea, the same notation. She'd planted it hours ago and was harvesting it now. This wasn't improvisation. This was architecture. The board filled up, and as it grew, something became clear to every mathematician in that room. Cora wasn't just solving Whitfield's problem. She was making it look small. His hand-picked problem, the one designed to end her, was shrinking, becoming a footnote inside a larger truth, a single star inside a constellation she was drawing in real time. Harrison Moore, front row, started shaking his head. Not denial, disbelief. He turned to the person beside him and whispered, "She's not solving the problem. She's proving a theorem. The problem is just a case." Phones went up across the audience. A dozen, then more. The live stream crossed 5,000 viewers. Cora reached the final line, wrote it clean, underlined it with a single steady stroke, set the chalk down, turned to the panel. "You asked us to prove this for the specific case." Her voice was quiet. Every microphone caught it. "But the specific case is just a shadow of something larger. Here, let me show you what it actually looks like." She picked the chalk back up. 3 more lines. A generalization. A broader theorem that contained everything Whitfield asked for, and everything he hadn't. Chalk down. She stepped back. Silence. The kind that has weight. The kind that presses against your chest. Whitfield sat at the judges' table, glasses on, pen in hand. He hadn't written anything in 6 minutes. He was staring at the board the way you stare at something that rearranges everything you thought you knew. Prescott picked up her pen, wrote on her scoring sheet. No smile. The notation was visible to the front row. A perfect score, and next to it, one word. Original. Caldwell stood up, began to clap, slowly. One person. The sound echoed like a heartbeat. Then a woman in the second row stood, a grad student in the back. Then 50 people. Then the entire room. 300 people on their feet. The camera crew recording. The live stream chat. A wall of fire emojis moving too fast to read. Harrison Moore was the first contestant to stand, clapping harder than anyone in his row. Whatever rivalry existed, gone. He knew what he'd witnessed. Derek, back row, had his face in his hands, shoulders shaking, not clapping. He couldn't. He was trying to hold himself together and failing. But Cora wasn't looking at the audience. She was looking at Professor Gerald Whitfield, the only person still seated, still silent, his hands flat on the table. 300 people standing and cheering around him. Cora didn't need his applause. She had the room. She had the proof. But she stood there anyway, chalk dust on her fingers, grandmother's earrings catching the light, looking at the man who compared her to a dog, erased her score, and offered her the chance to quit with a gentle smile. She waited, because this was never about winning a competition. It was about being seen, and she wasn't going to look away until he saw her. The applause was still rolling when Dr. Prescott stood up for the second time that day. She didn't wait for silence. She spoke over the noise, and the room came down on its own, fast, because everyone could tell from her face that something was coming. "Before we announce the official result," she said. "I need to address a matter of record." Whitfield looked at her. His expression shifted. Not anger anymore, something closer to dread. Prescott reached into a folder on the judge's table and pulled out a single sheet of paper. She held it up, not for the judges, for the room. "This is the original qualifying score sheet from this morning's first round, before any adjustments were made." She read one line into the microphone. Clear, slow, every word landing like a gavel. "Contestant number 14, Cora Lawson, qualifying score, 5 out of 5. Perfect. The only perfect qualifying score in the 19-year history of this competition." The room went dead quiet. This score was not reported to the public. Problem 5 was removed from all contestants' results, and scores were recalculated out of 4. Miss Lawson's ranking dropped from 1st to 9th. She set the paper down. For the record, Miss Lawson was the only contestant who identified the error in Problem 5. She was also the only contestant who solved the corrected version. Both facts were omitted from the published results. Murmurs. Not whispers, murmurs. The kind that sounded like anger finding its feet. A parent in the 4th row said, "Are you serious?" loud enough for the microphone to catch. The live stream chat was moving faster than it had all day. Prescott turned to Whitfield. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I believe the record should be corrected, Professor, for the integrity of the competition you built." She placed the original score sheet in front of him, a pen on top of it. The room watched. Whitfield looked at the paper. He looked at Prescott. He looked at 300 faces staring at him and a camera recording every second. He picked up the pen. He signed it. And somewhere in the back row, Derek Lawson exhaled for what felt like the first time in 6 hours. Whitfield stood up. The room went quiet. The instant, total kind of quiet that only happens when everyone is holding the same breath. He removed his glasses, folded them slowly, set them on the table. Then he looked at Cora. "The proof is valid." He paused, swallowed. "And the generalization is original work. I have not seen this approach before." Another pause, longer this time. The room waited. Then, quieter, almost to himself, but the microphone caught every syllable. "I owe you an apology, Miss Lawson, not for the scoring, for the assumption." He extended his hand. Cora looked at it. Then she looked at him. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She shook his hand once, firm, brief. Then she nodded, one small nod, and stepped back. Equal. Not grateful. Not triumphant. Equal. Prescott announced the result. Cora Lawson, winner of the 19th Annual Whitfield Sterling Open Mathematics Invitational. Perfect qualifying score restored. Exhibition round, original work. Standing ovation, the second one in 10 minutes. But this one was different. This one had release in it. The sound of 300 people who had been holding something tight in their chest, finally letting it go. Harrison Moore clapped until his palms were red. After the ceremony, Derek found Cora in the hallway. He didn't say anything. He just pulled her into a hug, and her composure finally cracked. Not into tears, but into laughter. Pure, overwhelmed, ridiculous laughter. The kind that comes out when your body doesn't know what else to do. She said, "I need my notebook back." He laughed too. "That's the first thing you say?" "It's a good notebook." 3 weeks later, Cora received a letter from MIT, signed by Dr. Elaine Prescott, an invitation to the university's summer research program. The letter was addressed to Ms. Lawson, mathematician. Not student, not contestant, mathematician. She pinned it to the refrigerator in her grandmother's kitchen, right next to the electricity bill and a coupon for laundry detergent, because that's where real life lives.